I want to thank everybody for joining us for today's live webinar from Asterisk entitled Case Intake, Key Considerations When Evaluating Solutions. My name is Kevin Miller. It's my pleasure to speak to you today, and I'm going to take you through a couple of quick introductory slides about Asterisk before we get into today's presentation materials. We can go to the next slide, Alan. So before we get into it, I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of participating in any of the Asterisk webinars, but we put out a lot of webinar content, mostly educational in nature, to try to cover a wide array of different topics in life science and R&D. Today's is going to be around case intake and pharmacovigilance. But who is Asterisk and why do we produce this content? We are a consulting firm that works very closely with organizations in the life science and R&D sector. A couple of fast facts about the company. We were established way back in 1995, and we work with lots of different technologies and lots of different vendors in the space. We are agnostic to that, however. We operate from locations in the United States and overseas and have over 1,700 employees. And one of the things that we always like to tout is that 90%, greater than 90% actually, of our team members have advanced science degrees. So we are a science-based company supporting science-based organizations. And our headquarters are in beautiful Red Bank, New Jersey. The type of companies that we help are startups through Fortune 1000, life science enterprises, chemical, CPG, government agencies, and research institutions. So that's just a little bit about us. I'll touch next on the next slide a little bit about the breadth of services that we bring to bear. We call it our service spectrum, and we like to say that we support the continuum of scientific operations and data management. And this is going to be a very wide range, everything from the very beginning, strategic innovation and roadmaps, enterprise architecture. This is where we are helping to develop transformative strategies and help you develop roadmaps which address whatever the business imperatives are and helping you get geared up for digital readiness. Enterprise architecture, helping you understand and plan for the technology and data architecture that are platform-based and data-centric and that you're going to need as you move forward as an organization. Data management and governance, implementing different strategies and methods and frameworks to maximize the value of your digital assets. From there, we get into business analysis, ensuring that the right people and process and technology are optimized to help you transform your workflows and your data and organizational change management. From there, we can help you select solutions, helping you pick the right technologies to support the work that we've done up until that point. From there, we can actually roll up our sleeves and do the development and implementation and then validation of these systems. And then when all of this is said and done, Asterisk is able to help staff, whether that's technical or scientific staffing, to help meet your needs and be an ongoing staffing resource for you after the fact. So that's a little bit about us. Let's go ahead and get into the content for today. I want to take a moment on the next slide and introduce our speaker, Alan Summers. I've had the pleasure of doing a number of webinars with Alan. He is the VP of Pharmacovigilance and Delivery Services here at Asterisk, and he brings over 20 years of experience throughout all phases of the product information lifecycle. He's led the service division for several pharmacovigilance software vendors and consulting firms, and he's very passionate about ensuring that client PV systems are both efficient and effective. Alan, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy the presentation like everybody else. And I'll be back on at the end.
Thank you very much. Grab your popcorn and enjoy. So, one of the reasons why I just brought this topic of case intake is, today pharmacovigilance is going through what I would call kind of a revolution. And that's due to a lot of the technology that the vendors are implementing within their safety systems. And one many companies are assessing is case intake. And we're doing many projects with companies, whether it's helping them with their RFPs or with their implementations. And the most common question that I get, when we're helping companies with their RFPs is, for my case intake tool, what are the features? What are the functionalities? What should I expect the tool to be able to do? And how's it going to help me and make my processes more efficient? Because as we all know, case intake is one of the most manual, time-consuming parts of your process, right? I've seen companies estimated all the way up to about 50% of the time spent on a case is spent on just the intake and triage of a case through its life history. And one of the issues that they have today is, with all the time that they're spending, they companies still don't feel like they're getting all the accuracy that they expect, right? Inconsistencies, data missing, not put into the right field. So there's a lot of frustration with today's process, and the volume of cases that companies are getting are exponentially growing, and so therefore the workforce is extremely challenged to keep up with it. So companies are looking to invest in this area of intake. Vendors are recognizing that companies are willing to invest because there's a large return on investment, and therefore implementing these intake tools that are highly automated. They're using AI, ML, automation, right? All the technologies that we've been hearing about for many years are finally coming to fruition. And by using these technologies, we're seeing companies reduce the time that they're spending on a case from, what previously was, I said 30 to 50% to, at times zero, to maybe 20%, right, depending on the type of case that it is. They're also seeing consistent data entry, right? The AI, they're only going to spell hospitalization one way, right? You don't have to worry about different standards, people mistyping. If they expect a product to be a product, it's going into the right field. So they're getting a lot more consistent data, which is providing them a tremendous amount of downstream efficiencies, in regards to signaling, reporting, and a lot of the other downstream type of processes. And so what companies are now, looking at when they're looking at these intake tools is, hey, I don't need as many people to be working my intake process, but that doesn't mean that I want to reduce my workforce, but companies are looking to reposition their workforce to be more strategic, right? To work on other areas that really do use and need that human review, that human mind. Now, of course, there's still going to be a lot, and we'll talk through that, of still human intervention, right? And we can also talk about, what the term is called a touchless, where basically humans aren't even looking at it. So the rest of the presentation, we'll just talk about some of these features, and discuss some of the pros and the cons and things just to be aware of when evaluating and looking at a case intake tool. So what I've put together, and we'll talk about each one of these steps, and is kind of an 8-step kind of intake process, which is pretty standard. I'm sure different companies may have some additional steps in here, or reorder them differently, but this is a general workflow that we see, where we acquire the data from some source, check that it's a valid case, see if it's a duplicate or a follow-up. If it's not, then let's prioritize it. Look at translation, medical coding. If there's an alert that needs to go out for cases of special interest, it's something like a death case or a specific drug reaction combination. And then once all that is done, looking at the intake and reviewing it and making sure that all the data is entered and is correct before we send it off to the case processing step. So we'll look at each one of these steps, talk about some of the functionality that systems are having in each. So when we look at the first step, which is the data acquisition, right, we're going to be getting stuff from all sorts of sources, right, whether it's spontaneous or literature, from a partner, regulatory agency, from your ETC. So we'll see them from a lot of different places, and they're going to come in a lot of different ways, right? Today, companies are receiving them email or fax, E2B, or some other electronic format. We're starting to see companies looking at social media to extract cases. When you have a partner, sometimes there's a shared file folder. There may even be some other sources that you have. So one of the key things that you want, and these systems have, is you need is to have the ability to not only be able to receive all these reports, but able to receive them all in their particular format. Right? If you have an intake tool that only does email and electronic, and can't do an eFax or a file folder, you have to look at how am I receiving these cases, and is this tool going to be efficient for me? Because if you're having that mix process of some are being automated, some are being manual, it becomes very cumbersome. We're seeing people missing cases, as well as just it's just not as efficient. So the first thing that we want to look at is making sure that the intake tool you have can receive all of the type of reports that you get in the different modes that you receive them. And the nice thing is you'll find that if the system can't handle a particular source, like example, social media, which is not uncommon, there are options or other tools out there that can help you automate porting of the data so that your intake tool could use it. So sometimes you'll need some assistance if your source is not available. The next we'll look at is the case validity, right? We need to make sure that it has the main 4 elements: a patient, reporter, adverse event, and product. And you want to make sure that your tool is able to do that for you. So that the tool, when it extracts or looks at the file that is received, that it's able to extract and recognize that you have all 4 of these elements and that it's a valid case. You want to make sure that if it doesn't have all 4 of these elements, that it brings them to a different part, probably in the workflow or in a case list, so that once again, you may need to have some human review to make sure that there isn't something that is missed. So and I've seen different systems do it different ways, right? I think, the classic story that I've seen is one of the companies, they've tested whether it was a valid case. They received a fax of literally a picture of a cat, someone's cat they tested, and somehow the system received it as a death case that had all 4 of these valid elements. Now, of course, that system needs to be trained a little bit better, but that's more the anomaly. But you do want a system that's very efficient at this, and making sure that all the cases that are valid are coming through into your workflow, and once again, ones that are not are able to be processed appropriately, right? And so it will be important for any company to make sure that they have an existing business process to that works with this system, to make sure you have a process for when it doesn't have any of those 4 elements, as well as a process for when it does have those elements for you. Now, from a duplicate check perspective, it's really important that your intake tool is looking at the data that it's received and recognizing if you've done this, received this case before. And the system's never going to be 100% accurate, but what we should expect the system to be able to do is to display all of the cases that are potential duplicates, and most importantly, giving us a score or a confidence score. Different systems will do it from a 0 to 5, 5 being that I'm confident that it's a duplicate, or 0 to 100. And so then once we're able to look at that case and confirm that it is a duplicate, we want to be able to open up the the duplicate case, or the 2 cases, I should say, side by side, so that you can confirm that there is a duplicate, or is it a potential follow-up. And if it is a potential follow-up, you'd want the tool to be able to indicate to the user what's changed, what's new, what's been updated, what's been deleted, give the user some guidance and advice, right? The other thing to think about also is if the system is 100% sure that it is a duplicate or that it is a follow-up, do you trust the system? And many of these systems have kind of a flag that says, if the system has a high confidence that it is a duplicate or a follow-up, to automatically process that. And so it's something that can be really helpful within a company's business process, but something that may take time for you to be able to trust. Now, the other thing to be aware of is some of the vendors, they charge you per transaction, right? A transaction means whether it's initial, whether it's a follow-up, whether it's a duplicate, anything that's received, right? Even if it's that picture of that cat, right, is they receive it as a transaction. So, they'll charge you per transaction, many of them. And so therefore you want to try to see if there's ways to minimize receiving duplicates or identifying them earlier in the process to help minimize this occurrence. Now, once we have our case, and let's just say it's an initial case, we want the system to automatically prioritize the case based off of some automated rules that are in there, right? And it's really important for the system to be able to do this so that it pulls the user's attention to the cases that are of the highest priority. And once we have this case list and it has its priority, we also want systems that are able to sort multiple columns within that case list. Many of the systems today, you only could do it for a single column, and many of them are starting to expand and grow so that you can sort on multiple columns, right? Which is extremely useful. So it allows you to sort by, a date and a product at the same time, not just one or the other. So being able to recognize and having the system put the priority in front of the user to help them identify the cases is going to be really helpful. And the great part about these new systems is they're able to do this very early on, because they're automatically extracting all of this data. There's not a need for humans to once again manually enter the data for them. And it, this is, the little takeaway here is indicating for you just be aware prioritization is really important for a system because it will help you with compliance. It will help you ensure that your team is working on appropriate items and working on the most serious of cases. The next feature we'll talk about is the translation. So as we all know, we're receiving a lot of non-English cases, and then the volume of non-English cases are growing as well. And so it's important to have a tool that can translate for us automatically. Today, or in the historical process, there's always human translation, whether you use a translation service or something. But now they're integrating with tools that are out there or using their own that are built within house that can translate tools to almost any language that is spoken. And of course, you want to make sure that the tool that you've selected can translate to the language that are most common or prevalent within your business. And after the case has been translated, right? You also want the system to be able to present you both the English and non-English values as appropriate with a score, right? How confident is it that it translated it correctly? And if it had difficulty translating it, identify the fields or the sections that do need human review. Now, it's important to have both that English and non-English, case values, so that both all of your employees, offices around the world are able to look at this case and make appropriate changes. And if needed for reporting purposes and being able to send it to your safety system of record, have the non-English values as well. Excuse me. And so by having this translation, this is one of the most cost-effective areas that these systems are providing in regards to translation. Translations aren't always 100% accurate, right? As we all know, medical terminology it can be a challenge for these tools, but we're seeing increased performance with them within the industry. The next is the medical coding. So after the system has extracted all their data and done all these other steps, as part of that extraction, you want the system to be able to code to MedDRA and WHO drug dictionaries or any other dictionaries which are relevant for your system, such as JDrug or some other specific ones that you may have. And being able to link and code these terms from the reported term to a medical term is going to be really important, and as well as allow you to have that consistency that we all are looking for. Now, being able to code is one part of that step. The other step is the system being able to properly assign that to the appropriate field. Is it an adverse event? Is it a medical history? Is it a suspect or concomitant medication? And you would think that this is one of the challenges that these tools would have, right? If they see something such as as simple as a rash, how is that rash being used within the narrative or some non-structured field? But surprisingly, these systems do a really good job because they're looking, using AI and ML, they're looking at the context around the terminology. And so by doing that, they're able to put these fields appropriately. And at times there still needs to be some human review. The other thing from a dictionary or coding perspective is you want to make sure that the system can utilize your IME as well as the DME and any other list that you have to help you derive your seriousness or other assessment values for your case. So systems nowadays, are, you're looking them to do all of the heavy lifting, including all of your medical coding as well. The next step we'll talk about is the alert for cases of interest. So for particular cases, based on a set of criterias that you've identified, right, whether it's maybe a death case or a specific event, product combination, or some other type of grouping, you want the system to be able to send an alert to a team member or a group. And that alert could come in whether it's a text or an email or some other, appropriate call as well. So we want these systems to be able to alert us as well, to bring attention to them. And you want them to be flexible to send it in various ways. And then the other thing that's important is you want the systems to have the ability to identify, if you're only sending it to an individual team member and not a group, is, what happens if that person's out of town, right? What is the process to send to the next person? Is that something the tool can do, or is that something that needs to be configured and maintained within the tool? Different systems are working in different ways, but you want to make sure that you have that fail-safe process, just like you do today. Today though, someone probably, it's done manually, where someone receives a case and they're sending an email to an appropriate person. Now we're looking for the system to do it automatically for us. And this is, it's really important, this type of tool, and you want to make sure you have that seamless process. And this process can be challenging. And so, you want to be able to leverage both your internal and off-staff experts to help you ensure that you have this type of successful implementation, that you have all the processes in place that you need, and that you've looked at all the features and functionality within the system. The next is the intake review. So after the system has done all of this processing of the case, extracting the fields, populating the data, translating, doing the medical coding, ensuring that it's not a duplicate, that it's a valid case, all of that, you want to make sure the system has a very friendly, easy to use interface that would allow your staff to review that data, make any additions, updates, or deletes based on flags that the system displays. So, what I call them is confidence scores. So you want a system to be able to tell you their level of confidence of how they extracted the data. Am I 100% sure that I got the gender right? Am I only 50% sure that I have the event coded right? And based off of their confidence, you want them to be able to highlight particular fields or even particular cases or sections, such as the product or reporter in general. So you want to make sure that systems are able to draw the user's attention to what needs human review, right? What I'm finding is systems, if they're 95%, 100% confident on a particular field, we're finding in the industry that it's pretty much accurate, right? And so, but the ones that are less than 100% confident, you're definitely seeing that there needs to be some human review. Maybe you're getting a partial address and it's not sure exactly how to parse that data. And then the other thing is, if once again, of course, if we're going to have humans doing review of everything, you want everything to be 100% audited. Not only what the individual is doing, but also what the system and the AI is doing. So everything needs to be in the audit trails and to have the same standards that we've always had before. And then one of the key things with these new intakes tool that you want to evaluate is its ability to learn. So if I'm making a change to the case because it's either couldn't interpret the data, or maybe it missed an event, or just made a mistake, you want the system to be able to learn from itself, so that if we're seeing this, if we're correcting the same pattern time after time, that the algorithm that it uses automatically improves, and therefore the system is learning from itself. And that's the whole idea between AI and ML. You want to make sure the systems are capable and implementing that in a friendly way. And some other features that the system that may have, right? We've talked about the deriving a confidence score, and that confidence score is going to be really important for a system, because users, we're going to find over time, are going to be drawn to that. Fields that are marked with red or yellow, they're going to be drawn looking almost through the system to identify those and make the corrections. Whereas fields that are green or high confidence, you'll find that users will just skip over. The next thing is you want to also see a system that has what we'll call a pass-through or touchless process within the system. So what that means is, if the system meets a certain criteria, right? Maybe it's a non-serious case or a product that's been on the market for a while and has high confidence in all the fields, so no human review is really needed, then you want a system that's going to be able to pass through that system. Now, I know that can be a little scary, even for me, to think that a case can go all the way through right into case processing and potentially even reporting without even seeing a human eye. But companies have started to implement this. And obviously they're doing it for kind of the scenario that I presented, for non-serious cases, for products that are pretty standard within the market and accepted, so that the risk here is very low. But these companies are seeing this work extremely effective and efficient, and expanding that the system's ability to, and the criteria to pass through that case. So it is something that I think eventually all companies are going to be doing. And so you want to make sure that your system has that, as part of your selection. We want to make sure that there's a single sign-on. Most of these systems are now cloud-based systems. Almost, I think all of them are cloud-based systems. So they integrate with your single sign-on, so that you don't have to have multiple user accounts, multiple passwords, and so forth. And then, as we already talked about, the other thing is you want to make sure that there's a full audit trail of all the case data that either the AI or humans have entered, and that includes both case and admin data. And the audit trail is definitely something we want to always assess when looking at any product. So these are a lot of the some of the main features that are available in a case intake tool. But I always suggest and recommend for companies to follow a thorough RFP process. Don't just trust what they're hearing from their neighbors of a system working well. You need to make sure that you find the right tool for your business, because they all do things differently and even have their own unique features. So these case intake tools are going to be there for the long run. So you want to make sure that you have the best one for your company, and follow the typical process that you use for any other safety system selection. So in summary, as I said, the PV industry today is very focused on intake, or even just the whole safety system replacement. But today we just focused on case intake. And the reason that they're looking at is because of the technology that's out there. It's significantly reducing the time that's spent processing a case, the manual intervention. Companies are seeing higher accuracy. So they're getting benefits downstream. Companies that have implemented intake tools already are already seeing benefits when they're looking at signals and doing their reporting and other downstream type of processes. Their volume of the number of cases that they're able to process has grown significantly. These tools are able to do all the extraction, do all of these checks that we've talked about. And they're able to do, some of them can do, hundreds in hours, right, or more. And the great thing about this is it really maximizes your department's usage by allowing you to reorganize and move resources to areas that have more need, that could really use a medical person and medical experience. The case intake tools, typically we're finding take somewhere between 4 and 8 months, and can be implemented at what I would consider a reasonable cost, considering the return that you're getting on the investment and the money that you're saving. But finding the right tool can be is a process, and you need to make sure you have a team implement the software in an efficient way so that you get and see all the benefits that you're hoping to get and can get out of these tools.
Well, thank you very much, Alan, for a great presentation. Everything came through loud and clear on our side, so I appreciate you being flexible about your location for today, for doing that, so that's great. Folks, if you have questions about anything today, you can ask them now using the question function in GoToWebinar, and we will do our best to answer them. In terms of questions of the company, questions of the services that we provide around pharmacovigilance, reach out to Michael Zakowski here at Asterix, mzakowski@asterixinc.com. It's up there on the screen. I'll leave that up there for a second so you can take that down if you so choose. And obviously out at the website, if there's questions, there's a number of ways to get in touch with our team right from there.